Whenever not in use, the Hopewell can remain in this screen or the Windows lock screen. During this state, the door is non-functional, is locked with an internal interlock. The site may choose to also put a physical lock on the door to keep it as a barrier as well. To start the Hopewell software, open Irradiator control. When Irradiator control launches, a pop-up will show asking for user ID. Use your site-specific user ID for entry and then hit OK. At this time, it will ask you to home all the access. It is suggested that you do home this before each use. Before beginning this step, the door will become unlocked, and check the chamber to ensure that there is no instrument or jig inside the chamber that may obstruct homing processes. When you do home, select all and we'll home the X and Y axis. Once homing is complete, you'll be presented with the main screen. This is where the user operates the Hopewell and performs exposures. The monitor on these is a touchscreen, but you can also use the computer mouse and keyboard for entry as well. At this screen, to begin exposures, you need to change from manual to an auto exposure. And then when you do auto, you will be able to use a procedure name drop down. With that, you'll be able to select the instrument that you're going to do exposures on. So in this case, as an example, I will pick a RDS31. I select that, and the step entry fields will update. If I select the step field, it will present a drop-down box with the points that are available to you for a source check. During exposure, make sure that the ports on the instrument are plugged if you're not using an instrument that requires the ports. There is a port also with a cutout that would allow putting a cable through there so that you don't have to have a port fully open for a cabled instrument. Whenever reading the instrument, you can use the top window to visibly see what the instrument readout is. Be mindful that the exposures on the top window are higher than it would be at the front of the instrument where you normally stand to operate. Along with the rear of the instrument is also a higher exposure point due to the source shooting in that direction. The plate on the Hopewell has 4 screws. You can also outfit it with screws in different positions as well according to your instrument needs. In most cases, the screws at the 4 corners is what we're set up for. We do have a jig that all sites have for their Hopewells and Shepherds. That's a pin jig. With the pin jig, it allows for reproducible geometry and also allows us to print jigs for different pieces of equipment. So in this case is an AMP 100 jig. For ours, they say the offset and the Z-axis setting as well on those, so it's easy for us to remember when we're setting up one of these devices. The jig itself clips in, and then that makes sure that the geometry is correct for this instrument. The pins are of different size, so as long as you have this in the correct orientation where the sticker is towards the door, everything will be fine with the positioning. Another style of jig goes directly on the plate. So in this case, this is a RDS31 jig. It goes directly on the plate and is designed by Hopewell and allows operation of the RDS31 or 32 inside the Hopewell. Depending on the source activity, you may have jigs such as this that extend beyond the table. This is so that they can reach a higher dose rate. In this case, it's for one of our older units that has a weaker source, and this is used for exposure of the AMP 100 or AMP 200 meters. Whenever using one of these jigs, it's especially important to ensure that you do not go too far forward on the table, or else you can make contact with the attenuator bodies. Anytime an instrument is set up with one of these, you'll have a pop-up for that exposure point, warning you whenever there's going to be a conflict between the attenuators and the jig itself. After inserting the jig, you can close the door, at which point the door open and system hold buttons will change to a green status, meaning that it is now safe to operate and expose the instrument. At this point, you can go ahead and hit expose. Doing so will expose the instrument to the radiation that's desired for that exposure point. So at this point you would be able to hit actuate. You select that and it will move the table to the position that's specified for the instrument and the step selected. For an auto ranging instrument like the RDS-31 that does not have a selection knob, you can go ahead and change to the next point. So we would select point number 1 in this, and then you would select actuate so that it moves the table to the correct geometry. At this point you can read this point and also see that it is in tolerance or out of tolerance. And then we'll change to our final point, and remember to hit actuate here as well. This will change the table to the final point position. After completing all the exposures desired on this particular instrument, you can hit return. This will shield the source, and you can see that it's now showing in a safe. That will mean that the door is unlocked as well. So we can use the unload button if desired. You don't have to use it, but the unload button will make it easier to get to the instrument through the door area. Unload positions the table towards the middle of the door on the lower section of the chamber. This allows for easier removal and insertion of the instrument. Whenever working with an instrument that does have a range selection knob, the operation will be slightly different. This instrument, we're going to demo a Model 19, which does have a range selector. We'll select the Model 19. There are times that a pop-up may show up. This pop-up does need to be selected to make it go away. The pop-up can show different information, whatever is programmed in for that instrument. It may have information related to the jig, like in this case, or it may have different indications like to move the table back manually before exposure. After selecting the instrument model, we'll select the step. In this instrument's case, there's only one step there. We'll go ahead and hit actuate. Once the instrument is in the correct position, we will have the expose button become functional. At that point, we will select expose. Once exposure is complete, we on an instrument like the 9.3 will need to change to the next selection. To do so, we can't just open the door, so we need to do a return first so that it's in a safe position. So once the source is returned, we return back to the safe designation. We would select the next step, hit actuate, and then do expose again. This process would complete until all the ranges that are manually selected are complete, at which point you will unload the instrument using the unload button if that's your desired method. For instruments that utilize the port openings, such as the telepole or 3078, for that, some units will have a position check. The purpose of the position check is that when you're using this position, you can easily see that the correct detector is in alignment. You would select the desired step, hit actuate. To position the instrument, remove the center port. Place the port in a safe position off to the side where it's not a drop hazard. The instrument will sit on either a table like this, or it may utilize a tripod. The instrument will be positioned through this port, and in this case is strapped down with a positioning tool. That would keep the instrument from tilting back while in operation. Whenever utilizing an instrument with a cable, you may be using the port here, which is the middle port, or you may use the port on the door. In either of those positions, make sure that the door jamb is clear from the cable. In this case, if I were using the door, when I go to close it, the cable will sag and has the potential to get pinched in the jamb even though it was clear earlier on. Closing the door on the cable will destroy the cable and you will have to get a replacement. There is an emergency stop button that can be hit at any time to scram the source and stop operation of the table movement. To use this, we push on the button, and this stops all table movement and scrams the source at the same time. To return it back to normal operation, we would twist clockwise, and then you'd have to reset the error on the software. The instrument does have safety systems in place to ensure that the users of the instrument do not get exposed to high radiation levels. In this case, the instrument is under exposure and the chamber does have radiation in it. If I were to open the handle, the machine is going to scram the source, and then the door cannot be opened. Once the user resets the error that presented on the software, then the door will be able to be opened because the source is no longer exposed. Another safety mechanism that's in place is that you cannot expose the source when the door is in the open state. Once the door is closed, then exposure becomes operable. The main door of the unit does have grease fittings for smooth operation. It's recommended that you do lubricate those grease fittings at least quarterly. Whenever operation and use of the instrument is complete, go ahead and make sure that the chamber is empty. Close the door and log off the Hopewell software. This will make sure that the instrument is locked and safe from tampering.